So, um, so it is my pleasure to welcome Hilda Macheso today. Have I said your name right, Hilda?
Yes, that's
I
right.
I hope so. So she's a disability rights advocate and dedicated professional based in Lilongwe, Malawi. Um, who she who has a great passion for human rights and advocacy that's led her to specialize in disability rights advocacy. And currently, she's working as a project coordinator at the Association for Persons with Albinism in Malawi, an NGO dedicated to advocating for the rights of people with albinism. She works both officially and as a volunteer with the organization, furthering inclusivity and other rights. She studied drama and French, a BA in humanities from the University of Malawi, and uses applied theatre to kind of advocate and lift the voices of people living with disabilities in a meaningful and reflective way. She's currently a representative of persons with disabilities in the third SADC Youth Parliament, where she actively contributes to regional discussions around concerns of people with disabilities. She's also currently part of the European Union Malawi Youth Sounding Board. So this is a team of 15 young people who advise the European Union delegation on their cooperation policy and how to be more participatory, inclusive, and relevant with the needs of young people in Malawi. So we really look forward to hearing about this work, both the advocacy work and also your work in theatre, Hilda. So over to you, and many, many thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I would like to say thank you so much, first of all, for having me. um, when Yvette was telling me through the email that, that we have, theater practitioners joining, I was like, oh my goodness, I hope I deliver to, these experienced people. So I am so excited to present. The names are there too, but yeah, I'm very grateful. Thank you so much for having me here. Um, much of it is what Yvette has said, dedicated professional disability rights advocate. Um, I am also the 2025-2026 recipient of the Human Rights Watch Marka Bristol Fellowship for Courageous Leadership in Disability Rights. I graduated in 2022 from the University of Malawi. Basically, everything that Yvette has said, and also I'm a theater practitioner, I'm a youth leader, and I'm a disability rights advocate as well. And um, I currently work as a project coordinator. Yes, that was, this is an NGO that safeguards and promotes the rights of persons with albinism, basically making sure that respect to persons with albinism is upheld in Malawi. And I am a former member of the University of Malawi Disability Rights Clinic, and this is a sort of a legal practice. It's a legal practice clinic, I would say. That is, I for legal students, they are supposed to have like something, like practicing basically what they are learning, and they do it through that. So it's at the core of it, it's like the clinic is part of the law department at our University of Malawi clinic, but it also, incorporated persons with disabilities who were passionate about, just making sure that, disability rights are respected. So I joined that, and actually there I introduced forum theater to improve how we communicated with community members on disability issues. So because the clinic, what they did mostly was like or they used it mostly on outreach, as part of outreach, where they would go, or where we would go into the communities, just sensitizing people about the rights of persons with disabilities, you know, handling maybe, cases where, for example, parents would come and just having an interface with the clinic itself, asking for the seeking legal guidance. It could also be persons with disabilities living in the communities themselves. So when I was coming in, I noticed that the way that the outreach was being done was basically interaction, but very very formal, very very teacher based. It's like people were putting themselves in a way of knowing more than the others, like the people who were coming to seek the expertise. And also when we would go, for example, for academic awareness events, for example, they would just set a booth, and then they would be teaching them, because these are law students, right, teaching people about disability rights. And I found it problematic because I just thought, okay, um this you are the way you are teaching is like someone who understand in the moment, but I don't think there's a way that this message is going to be grasped long term. So in my second year, there was now the introduction of a course called Theatre for Development. And when I learned that, now I started putting one on one together. That's when now I started. I was introduced to, the scholars that we're familiar with, Paul Freire, the Augusto Boas. Yeah. So when I saw that, I saw now a way of now, making the most of it. When we went to the field, we needed to have at least, because my understanding now would be there has to be a reason communities behave in a certain way. So rather than just giving them the advice, maybe we can explore why is it that they think it's normal for for example, inequalities to exist. What we see as inequalities could be something that they just see as normal. So intending to understand how they think, also how, also intending to show them how they are most affected, which would be the youth with disabilities, how also they feel. I felt like maybe it would be necessary to bridge that in order to achieve sustainable results. So of course, I continue to use applied theater techniques to foster interactions and reflection among members through my work. And in terms of my regional advocacy, I am the representative of persons with disabilities in the Third SADC Youth Parliament, which is a regional platform where young leaders from Southern Africa meet to deliberate pressing issues, propose policy recommendations, and strengthen youth participation in governance. And we've been having, of course, we've been meeting in person, um, virtually. It comprises of youth leaders from all the 16 SADC countries. So uh, in March, I authored. Maybe before I go that, maybe before I go on this point, it's just necessary to explain. Okay. So basically how my role is like I act as a spokesperson or the voice of youth with disabilities in this in the house. I work with the other parliamentarians, but youth parliamentarians, to just find out what's going on in their countries, how the status quo is for youth with disabilities, and then I highlight that and then present it to the house for further deliberation, of course. And in March of 2025, in our first physical sitting, I authored and presented a regional report on youth with disabilities, which highlighted challenges they face on, their quest to get an education and employment, as well as various recommendations, of course, from the same, and to ensure that inclusion is promoted and enhanced. And these actually, the recommendations were adopted in the form of motions to guide future initiatives, and also they were incorporated in a communique that would be later on go to be presented to the SADC Parliamentary Forum and subsequently to the SADC heads of states. I believe that was in August 2025 at the SADC summit. And now, in terms of voluntary involvements, I actually ceased to be the current because they just announced a second cohort this month actually. So my tenure has ended, but yeah, I am the former member now of the EU Youth Sounding Board, and like also Yvette said, it was a EU 15-member youth board, and we were responsible for advising the EU on their cooperation policy. We were just seeing how it could be more, participatory, more relevant, more effective to the needs of youth with, in Malawi itself. And yeah, here I continued utilizing various forms of applied theater, including forum theater. And yeah, during our youth-led interventions, because we had a chance to have, I think, up to we had two youth-led interventions, like is strictly youth-led, where one now was like we did the interface with youth. I think that was our climate resilience event. We did it in an area that is like flood prone, and it's scorching hot, but it's also flood prone because of the climate changes, and this used to cause a lot of climate anxiety. So we did that, and we we worked with youth there, and also another one that wasn't completely youth led, but we worked with also youth. We have in Malawi, we have the Irish rule of law that has one of the programs is now they deal with youth in conflict with the law, right? They take, for example, youth who are troublesome, for example, rehabilitating street children and things like that. So they take them and then they train them to just, probably training them because they can, to just avoid future troubles, right? They rehabilitate them, and then uh what they did in this particular instance is like they were now looking for, a way for these youth to now, because it was now the graduation, and then they were trying to showcase what these youth have learned, from the start. When they were coming, they were basically youth who hadn't changed. They were good kids, who did bad choices, basically. So they were just, it was like a way of just showing them, showing other, like the other communities who came to the graduation to say, okay, these are still, your community members, and they are, this is what they've learned. Basically, they're going to be responsible youth. And yeah, so we designed that, we rehearsed the plays with them, and we showed how those programs that they underwent had changed them for the better. So now, in terms of intersectionality and also where youth advocacy sits, maybe it's worth noting that the youth population with disabilities across the SADC region itself represent a significant yet overlooked demographic, and approximately 15% of the world's population, of course, lives with some sort of a form of disability. And this itself, in Africa, it also holds. And in a region with a predominantly youth population, of course, like the Southern Africa, 60% of the population, um, the 60%, the 60% of the population is first of all under the age of 25, and estimates suggest that uh, from 10 to 15% of youth aged 15 to 24 in the SADC region have a form of disability. It could be a physical disability, it could be something sensory, visual, things like that, an intellectual disability. And yeah, of course, I think we all know how now albinism fits now in the, realm of disability, because of skin issues and also because of the eyesight issues. And these youth also experience multiple marginalization, both based on the age. First of all, the fact that they are youth, and also the fact that they are youth with disabilities, and this really negatively affects their access, their voice, and representation in key decision-making processes in areas like Africa, of course, where um most of the power, like for example, in decision making processes, it could be like democratic processes. Most of the power would, like, it's like you see I don't want to use the word clinging to power, but I would have to use that for lack of a better word right now because so yeah, you see that, that dynamic where the older generation is really clinging on to power and suppressing the youth. We usually hear that, the youth are the future, the youth are the future. But in terms of instead of properly molding them into that, putting them into places where now they can be able to speak and represent, they can represent and actively contribute, they seem to be sidelined. And it's even worse when you're a person with a disability. So youth advocacy, therefore, uh, especially with also what I'm doing, it sits in now reshaping
Hilda,
and
we've lost you for a
trans
moment.
youth with disabilities. So sit at the table when you are okay. Now what? Because that is not. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, we're back. Yes, you're
Okay.
back, Hilda. We can hear you.
Sorry for that. Um, okay. So,
Would it help if we turned our cameras off?
I will, okay. So I'll just take it again. I'll say youth advocacy in this case, matching and transforming systems to ensure tailored, meaningful inclusion of youth with at least my style of advocacy is not okay. Okay. Sorry, I
Would it
think
help?
I was trying to. Can you hear
Hilda,
me?
will it help if we go off camera?
I think it might help if Hilda goes off camera because it's her Wi-Fi.
Okay, okay. Then we'll just listen.
Okay.
Hilda, you okay?
Yes, yes, I'm okay. Can you hear me? I think my network is
Yeah, now
bad
we
this side. Oh, sorry.
yeah.
All right. So, I was explaining that in terms of now the kind of youth advocacy that when advocating for youth, I'm not just asking for a seat at the table. Basically, I am trying to, advocate that the whole table, you know, accommodates persons with disabilities. The whole table should be able, it's basically about change, lobbying for or advocating for systems that uh that are designed with the voices of youth with disabilities from the start. It's not something about tokenism. I try to move. I move before of just saying, hey, we should be able to, we should be we should be oh, yeah, we should I'm not just basically what I'm saying is I'm not trying to just say youth with disabilities should just be, be seen. Basically, I'm asking that all the systems that are being designed should incorporate their voices, for true inclusion to be achieved. So now, in terms of theater as a tool for change, um I had explained that through my work, extracurricular and voluntary activities, I have utilized applied theater as a tool to promote dialogue, raise awareness, promote dialogue and understanding of issues faced by marginalized groups. And some of the ways in which I've been able to do that is through the University of Malawi Disability Rights Clinic, where I used it to promote understanding of disability rights issues, and the EU Malawi Youth Sounding Board. In the case of the Irish rule of law, for example, where we're trying to come up with graduation material for children in conflict with the law, and also just using interactive theater to raise awareness of albinism and to debunk associated myths. I know myths that are associated with albinism and also the stereotypes that go with the condition. So how I do it is that I devise plays based on the real experience and challenges faced by youth with disabilities, of course, among other youth, and invite audiences to step into also the performances, to replace characters, for example, with forum theater, with how, when the play has been presented. And this play, by the way, it's based on the challenges that we, have gathered that persons with youth with disabilities go through. So when that is being played out, we'll have the option to now invite the audience, and then the audience come in and say, okay, you know what, if I don't think what happened was right, in the if it was me, if, for example, if I was the teacher, this is how I would react. If I was the student, maybe I would be able to go report this, to report it, take it up further. So basically we try to understand how these people think that the situation could have been handled differently. And usually the audience, the participation, what we do is like we usually, for events, for example, awareness events, we ask for more time. And then the plays are rather short. And then right after that, we just have like a discussion from the plays, how also, because usually it's like now more things are coming up, how sometimes people feel like, okay, we did not know that, this practice was wrong. So the play itself starts as a stepping stool now, where now people start to reflect how they, how their surroundings are, how they treat issues, for example. So for the things that they consider normal, and then they are able to like question beliefs, engage openly. I encourage open discussions. Sometimes also, using other applied theater methods depending on how the story goes, because sometimes we have even the youth themselves now coming in to say, okay, you know what, your story resonates with how I felt. And then maybe they go to explain, this happened to me once, I felt so helpless. And then we might say, okay, will you be maybe willing to, for us to, you can tell us, and then we can play that out. And then we also, present it to the audience now to say, okay, you see how this person feels now, for example, if this was your child, how would you feel? Right? So all these actually come out from the play. The play just starts it basically sets a chain of those reactions. And the performances, of course, are presented through during sensitization campaigns and awareness events. And I usually, wherever necessary or whenever possible, rather, I prioritize including affected youth that those particular communities are familiar with, so they own those stories. And I feel like when communities see someone who they are familiar with, they are more able to engage, right? Because this is basically someone that they know. Um, so maybe for you to understand, I would love to take you through the situation of albinism, how albinism is in Malawi, like the situation itself. So persons with albinism represent a significant proportion of the working age population globally. And in Malawi, the last census was in 2018. So the National Statistic Office reports it estimates that there are approximately 134,636 persons with albinism. At least that was in 2018, which made about 0.08% of the population itself. So, unfortunately, persons with albinism, they continue to face severe discriminations and human rights violations and barriers to participation in the society itself. And this is actually driven largely by negative attitudes and prejudice. And in Malawi, I think much like most African countries, because there are extreme human rights violations that are unique to Africa. And Malawi being one of them, harmful traditional beliefs and witchcraft related misconceptions. Um, they persist. Basically, there is also the belief that, for example, the body parts of a person with albinism can bring wealth, and these actually continue to place lives of persons with albinism at risk. It contributes to exclusion, it contributes to stigma, it contributes to, very various human rights violations and the denial of basic rights, such as education, health care, things like that. So, from 2014 to date, in Malawi alone, we have over 213 cases of human rights violations against persons with albinism. These include verbal attacks, verbal abuses, abductions of persons with albinism, killings, mutilations, basically, stemming from the same myth that body parts, can be used in rituals for things like, to promote wealth, to so also grave robberies where they steal the bones of persons with albinism who have been, laid to rest. Now I'm just going to give you a case of my advocacy using applied theater. At least one of these is that during my time with the university, the Disability Rights Clinic, I would use forum theater during sensitization campaigns to to challenge these misconceptions and harmful attitudes. And this, of course, I did in between 2021 because I finished school in 2021 and then I graduated in 2022. So in schools and mostly schools, community spaces that were around our district, which was Zomba. And Zomba was easier, first of all, with the work that we're doing. And also, the University of Malawi is located in Zomba. So, proximity, it made sense proximity wise. So, what we did was I designed and performed, of course, interactive performances together with other students. um uh, if you remember, I had explained that also other students would join, not just the one from the the one studying law, but also others who were also like special needs students, and yeah, people with albinism, other students with albinism. And depending on also how many times we would visit the place to interact with uh groups that were trying to like highlight their stories. If there were people who would be comfortable being incorporated in those plays, it would would include them in there, right? So that yeah, would they would be included in there. So um there is one, of course, that involved like name calling, where because persons with albinism are, they are distinct from the black population. So that also attracted, like some sort of verbal abuses, like you'd be walking in the street and then someone would just hurl insults, to you, and you would go, for example, to school, and this was, in primary and secondary schools, where some students would actually actively avoid sitting next to students with albinism, because first of all they would assume that they would get, quote unquote, get that albinism. They would be it would be transferred. There were all these stereotypes to say, persons with albinism are dirty, persons with albinism, because they are a curse. So why basically would you want to sit next to a curse? So this, by extension, made, like children with albinism would not want to go to school, would not want to go to school. So one of these actually involved us going to a school that was closer to our university, and just um using, forum theater, and also, playback theater, would go there and, just interact with the students, and sometimes would do that but with the whole community, like, and we created that space for audiences to now engage with these issues. It's the stigma and also the impact of discrimination on students, who basically did not have control on their conditions. So, following these interventions, because we kept in touch, learners, of course, other like the other peers, also demonstrated that increased awareness, leading to a reported at least the decline in bullying, at least from them, and also more understanding from teachers on how, to include persons, students with albinism in the classroom, because before that also the existing um stereotype would be uh children with albinism, students with albinism are difficult to deal with because they ask a lot, which is basic. It's not true, right? It's them just asking for reasonable accommodation, and it should not be much. So there was that, at least understanding, increased level of understanding. And yeah, um I guess right now I would just conclude that the aspect of sustained impact, of course, I love using applied theater because of also its aspect of sustained impact. If I haven't been to Zomba for quite some time now, but if I was to go there, I know that, because we're already familiar with this school, I can go and, we can go and assess the impact that, our disability rights clinic, these theater pieces through the disability rights clinic had. So I know that, it wouldn't be hard to to just see how that aspect now, still holds. And this, in my opinion, makes it applied here a powerful tool in promoting, first of all, the reflections and shifting mindset, and ultimately also reclaiming our rights, basically, as persons with disabilities. And in the designing of the policies, of course, I've also uh, found that the use of theater enables those who find it difficult to speak up during mainstream advocacy, like the advocacy that was done before forum theater, for example, was introduced to, for example, the disability rights clinic. They are now able to speak up, and they are able to contribute their views, because it's like now we are giving them the space to just be themselves. And in turn, this leads to the implementation of now well-rounded policies, right? Instead of having someone speak for you, you've spoken, and then that which you've spoken is now, used to build these well-rounded policies where also everyone's voice is incorporated. And the transformative power of theater and performance, of course, we know that it can be harnessed to reshape rigid systems that exclude youth with disabilities, and also ensuring that our rights and voices are at the heart of how policies are designed and delivered. So yeah, that's uh a bit about my work, and thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Hilda. That was really, really interesting. And I'm most interested in the fact that you work both on a community level in praxis and that you're working at a policy level and including young people in making policy. That's really interesting. I think policy work is a long-term work. That is interesting, but often difficult to get into. So that's really interesting for me. But I'm not going to hog my position as a chair. So are there any questions from the floor?
Maybe Hilda could try her camera again. It's so nice to see her as well for the question.
I agree. Yeah, lovely. Yay, you're back. So thank you. Questions for Hilda? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Hilda. So I'm your neighbor here in South Africa, and the stuff that you spoke about in terms of, the kind of physicality around the bodies becoming the kind of the body being dangerous in terms of being socially constructed as the body parts, all of that stuff is stuff that is very is carries in our country as well. And I'm wondering, because your advocacy work is so incredibly beautiful, I'm wondering if there's any way, have you noticed changes in attitudes? Have you noticed in those, always working at a grassroots level and then at policy level, how are you measuring any change? Is it just being able to be more free in society? What are the measures that you are working with?
Okay, so in terms of the would you like me to describe like at is separate like at policy level or at advocacy at
I think at
applied theater?
advocacy level, I think, we are, all of us in this network are also practitioners and
Absolutely.
work at that kind of advocacy making level. So I think for me, I'm most interested in that.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, the measure would be in terms of the communities that we were working with or we work with, right? Um the engagement that you start you start interacting with people instantly and almost instantly after the plays have been done. You have people actually coming to you and say, okay, this we didn't know, that this was also, people felt this way, for us we just grew up with these things, so first of all, that would be that the indicator, and also now long term, because whenever possible, what I used to also emphasize in is that I would it wasn't always possible, right? But it was me now just asking for like repeated visits to places that we had our advocacy. Um, for example, at this school, right? It was just basically us monitoring if there is change. So I can, like in the case of this one in particular, it was like most students, because students actually never felt like going to school. So the retention rates would actually had started dropping, you know. People are students because they were being students with albinism were being branded as all these things and also troublesome to the teachers. So it wasn't for them, they said it wouldn't make sense for them to continue going to school, right? So after that, we now started noticing that persons with albinism now could go back to school, and they started now, having friends, the same people who were sidelining them. It actually school, like pupils, the same classmates would now be willing to offer them notes, for example, to say, okay, you say you can't see something on the board here, you can have my notebook, for example, you can copy from my book, which was something that was never done. So there were, you know wins like these now that, yeah. But it was actually like that. I would have loved to, continue engaging more, but when it came to issues of also resources, and like I said, primarily the UNIMA, the Disability Rights Clinic, was viewed more from the legal lens. But it was something that, you could actually see those results.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds so beautiful. And I mean, just listening to you speak, it's so inspiring. But I think that the change that happens in people's attitudes is the biggest change,
Yeah.
because it ripples through. Yeah, you've just kind of renewed my faith in artistic methodologies of research and change. So thank you, Hilda, so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So Hilda, also in terms of policy, I mean, one of the things you mentioned is that even teachers have odd attitudes, particularly around reasonable adjustment in terms of maybe the sight issues that young people with albinism have. So is there something where this is impacting on maybe teacher training or formally, where those kind of awarenesses are being addressed through, say, the education department or government policy, not just rights, because we know that there's a huge gap between rights and even, legal rights that people have and their lived experience on the ground. So that kind of needs to be fed into training with, state teachers. But also, I was really interested in how you've taken the law students and helped them to understand how they need to interact with people. In some ways, it's very ironic. They've got legal information, but their clients are people that have lived experience. So there's a real opportunity for an exchange. And I think that live theatre frame is a really interesting frame to create that exchange. So almost a reciprocity rather than this power that you were talking about, And I mean, I think that idea of taking a law clinic, and I wonder if it's possible to do that also with medical clinics, because often in a medical situation, anybody, but certainly people with disabilities, are treated as objects. Your body is like a piece of meat that is, they do whatever they want with you. Whether that same kind of methodology could be mobilized in a medical clinic, I would love to see that. So that, almost that medical humanities approach where doctors have to do the forum theatre and experience what it is to be on the other side, and the flipping that lived experience. So the praxis is really, really interesting. But of course, nothing changes if the law and the training doesn't change. So it has to kind of work from both ways, both angles. How is this feeding into the EU? That's interesting for me. Or is the EU just supporting training of young leaders?
So the EU itself is, I think the EU Youth Sounding Board initially was just formed to advise the, like I said, it advised the EU on how to make that cooperation policy more participatory and inclusive, also and relevant. So what we did, because in the EU, it was me and another colleague of mine, we had studied the same thing. We had majored grammar. So it was like, now it was a tag team effort, right? So we would advocate to say, okay, maybe it would be nice. We are representatives, yes, but it would be nice if you could also hear for the youth themselves, right? And how you can do that, for example, is applied theater, because it just we we just know how it basically brings out the best in people, just allows people to be able to express themselves. So um in that area, now it would be the youth themselves, telling us, telling us, because as the representatives, right? Sometimes it would be at these events, it would be also other representative from the EU delegation itself, but it would be now them explaining about their challenges and how it makes them feel. So in terms of that angle now, um, once those voices were heard, we would suggest solutions together. Like what would help, for example, what would make you happy? So that would be taken into consideration. And what was happening with the EU was like, apart from these events, where we would interact with people, we would also analyze their programs, like policy analysis of sorts. So we would say,
Okay.
okay,
Oh, that's it.
your yeah. So you had this project that is being rolled out, and we have identified these youth-centric gaps, disability-centric gaps, and these are the targeted recommendations that we are proposing. So we would even take those things that we had from the ground, and then we would weave them in there, and then they would say, okay, because at least for Malawi, youth EU programs are implemented in phases, right? So they say maybe we might not be able to incorporate that right now in this phase, but the next phase of the same program, right? We are going to have these, we are going to, and they would refer us to the specific sections of the EU delegation who were already making these programs. Yeah. But in terms of, just to answer your question, I don't know if I answered this one properly. Okay, in terms of the training itself of teachers with albinism, I know that there've been talks about every teacher now, regardless of whether you are going to interact with special needs students or not, you are supposed to now have a certain knowledge of, like special needs education should be, there was talks that it's going to be introduced in the curriculum itself, right? So that teachers have a general understanding of the complexities, the various disabilities, not just albinism, but now the needs of the students with disabilities that they might potentially, interact with in their classrooms. So I think that's also a win. Yeah.
That's really, really interesting. I mean, most people in this room work in dance, so not so much in theatre, which for me is interesting because what you're talking about is discourse. Policy is discourse, and so are the techniques you're using in applied theatre. It's very discursive. Forum theatre is very much you sit in this seat and you feel what it feels like, and then you have to respond. But I think dance also does that in an embodied way. It kind of puts people in a sense of, especially when you work in an integrated way across different abilities, not just disability, but abilities, where people have to meet each other in a different way, or an uncomfortable or just different way. So I think what's interesting for me thinking about this is how what forum theatre does, which puts you in a hot seat, can happen when you ask to perform in a way that maybe isn't the way your body moves, or you ask to do something and you do it differently than maybe somebody else might do it. And then we meet each other in that way. So this idea of meeting others is a really interesting strategy of breaking down differences, barriers. You talk quite a lot about barriers in your piece, how do we do this in embodied ways? Whether that's theatre or dance, it's really, really interesting. And then how we find, to some extent, what we're looking at is translation. We're looking at how do we translate experience so that it can be understandable to someone else. And And part of what we have to also do with that, and I noticed that in your report, is it's always a thing of we need funding to do it because we need space, we need support. And I know that's something that on Diego is here, that he talks a lot about, that he actually inflects his work through medical or other kinds of social frames in order to get funding. It can't be done directly. You sometimes got to inflect it. And Diego, I'm not speaking for you. I'm just picking up on things that you've said in the past. Really interesting to think about how one can do this. How are you, Diego?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm listening. Really, very exciting what's happening in Malawi.
I don't know if you want to talk about some of what you've experienced in Kenya in relation to what Hilda's talking about.
Yeah, I think they're very interesting issues. Let me try and put my video on. My video on. I'm still in a celebratory mood. It was my birthday today. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you are. Yeah,
good happy birthday.
Yeah. Thank you. You're very exciting. I'm listening to her talking about to Hilda talking about the applicative performance methodologies that are working at the community level, and working towards even policy influence and mobilizing communities and changing attitudes and probably even influencing behavior. It's very, very exciting. But I also have experience of that kind. What I think I can say is that there's something that's very interesting between dance and theater. The things that stand out as the main art form, because you just brought her back to talking about dance and what dance does. As much as theater also, especially participatory theater methodologies, are able to move people from a provocative level to a reflective and action level as audiences, dance has also been able to do that a lot, especially in Africa. And the beauty about the nature of dance is that it naturally makes it participatory. Without necessarily thinking about a clear methodology. Dance alone makes the process very participatory. But then I'm just looking at those of us who are concerned with the search for the form, the real art form that stands out in this kind of work, whether it is activism or lacing up with community development. Chances are that 90% of the time we are partnering with organizations who are the ones who have come up with that strategy, and we the creatives are just feeding into that agenda. Normally it's normally a challenge. I think it's about resources or ability to continue that makes artists not be able to initiate and run that program independently. And if the artists were the ones to do that, then there's more in terms of performance methodologies, artistic exploration, experiments, and this idea of playing with creative stuff that you'd see in this. So my question is, what really stands out when it comes to these performance methodologies? There is a theater component, so much about role play and existential issues and processing that through narrative. But then when you bring in dance, to bring in these theater elements in your experience, what do you think is the most art form that stands out? And remember, when we talk about dance here, we're also looking at the element of mixed ability. This is now more like dance itself bringing a representation of inclusion of the arts and of people, and at the same time being a methodology that naturally makes it participatory. So for you, in your own experience, in terms of searching for the art form, what is it that stands out? Is it dance? Is it the theater? Is it the forum narrative? Is it the storytelling? Or is it, what do you think is actually standing out for you? Thank you.
So, first of all, I have to agree with you. The aspect of partnering with other organizations, I also find it to some extent limiting, because there are certain things that, a practitioner cannot do. You have to, because first of all, you are also riding on their funding, on their, so there are other things that you would want to do, but you can't because you are on their budget. When they say no, for example, you cannot go multiple times. What do you mean you want to go multiple times to the community to engage with them? We don't have any budget for this. You feel constrained in that. So I totally agree with that. To me, in terms of community engagement, I think something that stands out is the ah that's really insightful. I never really thought about it. I guess it's the aspect of it's the forum theater itself, first of all, the aspect to just um have other people, engage with the piece that we've made. And the fact that when people now are being turned into the, for example, spect actors, and when people now are starting to critically think, the discussions that come after every session, because for the most part for me it's the use of forum theater. I have that one, I use it as a base most of the times, right? We go into playback theater sometimes, yeah, but for the most part it's been a forum. But yeah, so it's the something that stands out for me. It's the fact that the community itself, when they start interacting with what we've said, and when now they start now bringing in also other instances, because this now ends up becoming a bigger conversation. Just sometimes we discuss, it moves from the piece, like the piece itself. So that is the thing that stands out, the fact that this an artist, like a piece, is able to just allow people to, it just drags in now these conversations, and sometimes uncomfortable conversations and things like that. So that is something that stands out for me. I don't know if I
Great.
adequately
Yes.
addressed your question.
Yes, yes. Well, yeah, definitely much, much better. And there's also the issue, I think I heard about it earlier in the conversation. How do you evaluate, or how do you just continuously monitor and evaluate your impact at the society? Because it's very interesting, by the way. This is artistic work is really huge, because you have to evaluate the artistic impact and also look at the artistic process and separate it from the social work and look at the social impact. And but then what is interesting for me is how we can evaluate the impact artistic interventions make in development or at the community level. It is always a challenge because of what you've just said. When you're micromanaged, when the initiative came from somebody else who has the funds and has the resources and therefore dictates the agenda, chances are that you will not have the freedom for continuity, and you will not be able to impactfully, therefore, evaluate your change at the community level, because you need time. But by the time the
Yeah.
time comes for you to be able to tell that this is as a result of our intervention, that project will be over, funds will be over, you'll have scattered. So there's not really a time to evaluate work at the community level as an artist, because you don't have the power for continuity. Uh, Attitude and behavior change interventions using creative means always take time to be evaluated. It cannot be immediate. You can have immediate evaluation work, results, where you're going back to the community and ask them what they saw, how it made them feel. This is very immediate, and it doesn't really impact on the behavior or attitude that you want to change. For example, attitude towards people with disability, people with albinism. You might want to take another 1 or 2 years to come back to the same community to see how they are treating, not even how they're responding to your presence, but how they're treating people with disability, to try and attribute that to your own intervention during the time you were there, so a year ago. But this time you may not have the resources. The organization that was there was not there anymore. And this is a challenge that creatives in development are facing. I'm happy to hear that you're going through what probably you went through also, especially in the 90s, with their HIV/AIDS awareness programs, democracy and governance, hunger and safety net, God knows, nutrition security. It was climate, it is everything, family planning. And the artists have always been involved. But then the way that the artist is involved to be able to measure properly the impact of their own intervention is not easy. And normally it goes with the wind. But I think with time, I hope that organizations in the arts can have those that freedom to create and freedom to have resources to be able to do this, because you need to continue for you to be able to properly measure the impact, of your work at the community level. Yeah, but I guess it's a beautiful artistic experience.
I agree. So in terms of how we are able, or like how the impact is being measured, I kept circling back. Actually, the reason I used the example from the university, the disability rights clinic, was because I had worked with them, so I had time, right, to be able to interface with the people that I was working with, like the community that I was working with. So after let's say like post 2022, I haven't engaged with them, like the community itself. But when I was there at school, like from 2019, 2020, the shift was actually there. Like it was actually, it was something that you could see when you step in, because it was like now, even the name callings, like I said, I alluded to the name callings, they had decreased. And it's not just the name callings themselves. You just saw that even the environment actually changed. So um I stayed there. I think the between the introduction of the applied theater techniques, it was about 2 years. So within those 2 years, I actually saw the change, the levels of confidence in students with albinism itself, how they just, yeah, the abilities for them to make friends, for the ability for them to just go home and come back without being, because these were things now that when we went to monitor, these were things that we now hear for themselves, like from the students themselves, right? Like I used to be code names and now I don't. I used to, they don't affect me as much. I have friends who can now defend me when someone does something wrong, so yeah, this was something like this itself, it didn't require us to be there. It was like something that after we had, conversed with the people, they had told us their issues, and then we had worked together. It was something that would come, periodically and to check. It's only sad that after we did it in 2020, after we graduated, and then, it was something that I didn't follow up, because technically I was out of the the disability rights clinic itself. Now, I have to say I agree with what you're saying, because in the case, for example, for the EU Youth Sounding Board, where we've had two, two interventions. One having to do with the Irish rule of law itself, and it might be hard to tell. I do not have a concrete response for you at the moment, but I guess it's just now a matter of going through the Irish rule of law itself and seeing. But my solid response, like that gives me confidence, comes from my work with the University of Malawi, the Disability Rights Clinic. That's where now I can give you like solid evidence to say, I have seen it with my own eyes, like the transformation happen in real time, because I spent uh those years actually already there within proximity to the communities and the schools that we were advocating for.
That's really interesting. And I think we need to almost build these things in where we can. But I think the point Diego makes about these short-term short-term projects, no evaluation, no go follow through years later is another thing we probably need to address with funding bodies and other organizations as well, maybe partner organizations as well. But yeah, it is an issue, I think. I also think the issue that you raise about where the artist sits in relation to this work, in the same way that Hilda was saying about where young people sit, they need to be more center than they necessarily are. They're not just mobilized to do, messaging. I think is really important. So thank you so much for sharing. It's interesting. It's lovely to hear another part of the continent and what's going on. It's really nice to also be able to connect across, southern East Africa that we have today, and then moving up north as well. So thank you for everyone who's been here and participated. Shalane made a nice point in the chat about connection. All of us is about creating connections with people in our work. We understand people when we actually meet them. And I don't just mean, hello. I mean, actually encounter people as human beings, which is really powerful. So thank you for that. I'm going to hand over to Leanne now to tell us a little about Jomba, which is coming up, Jomba Masihambisani Dialogues in May. So over to you, Leanne.
There we go. Okay. So thank you again, Hilda, and thank you, Yvette. And it's really lovely to see everyone, Sydney, Rena, and Diego. We haven't seen Gladys's face, but nice to see Gladys, and Jelane's joined us as well. So really beautiful. The Jomba Masihambisani Dialogues, as you all know, is an online colloquium that happens every year in May, and we are very excited this year. The thematics is called Choreographies of Activism, Moving Bodies as Disruptive Presencing. And the programs are sort of long title, but the program's already been fulfilled. We have 5 extraordinary keynote dialogues with artists from sort of Mali, from Egypt, from Jamaica. So really kind of a really beautiful group of people speaking. But the thing that is particularly exciting is that, as you all know, Yvette and I have just finished our book, and we are doing the official launch of the book at the colloquium. So we will be sharing, I think most of you have got, the book is open access, so it's easily to download, and it's it's a chance for us to. The book is called Encountering Disability and Citizen. I can't speak tonight. It's been a long day. Sorry. Encountering Disability and Citizenship Through Contemporary Dance in Africa. And we'll launch the book officially, and we'll have a little bit of a dialogue. And Sarah Lee Castellan, who was one of the reviewers of the book, will be the respondent and the chair. And it's a 45-minute session. And because the book is so intricately connected to this this network, we hope, and most of you sitting here today are actually in the book. So your presence is in the book. So we hope very much that you would join us for that and be part of the celebration and of the discussion. And we will, of course, share the details of that. It's absolutely free, absolutely online. We'll share the whole program with you, and hope you'll come to a few other things. But particularly, we would love our network and this beautiful community that have held us up so deeply to be there. So, yeah, thank you.
So it's 26th to 28th of May online, just so that you have the dates. And we will send out the information on the network. And, the case, we've got 5 case studies on Diego's Dance into Space is one of them. So we're very grateful for those artists that gave a special kind of in-depth interviews and kind of worked very closely with us in putting those chapters together. So we really hope they're there, and everybody who comes, please bring something bubbly or whatever it is you want to drink. So that it would be fantastic if we could be in a real space, but the chances of us flying now are minimal to nothing. Even if we get a ticket, the chances of the flights taking off get remoter and remoter. So we'll have to do it. We're very glad we can actually see each other online. So that's lovely. Anything else anybody else wants to say, ask, tell? No. So thank you so much for being here today. Everybody take care. And we really look forward to seeing you in May, and then again at the next one that we have. So take